Hello, Ayurdhi. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Tamash. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah. Could you share a bit about your personal and professional journey? What led you to engage so deeply with critical psychiatry and mental activism?
All right. Well, that's a big one.
Yeah.
So it started early on. When I was maybe around 15, I found a book on psychology and I was utterly fascinated. Um, of course, I did not realize what it would turn into. But I think my movement towards critical psychology was more personal. It was when I had a friend I deeply, deeply cared about, and I saw the sister fail him completely and utterly. So, multiple medications, just there was nothing was helping, and nobody seemed to know what they were doing, and there was just pain and suffering all around. And I just saw that the meds were unhelpful, the therapists were unhelpful, the whole system understood nothing about this person's experience. And watching that firsthand was terrifying. And then I guess later on, I was learning psychology in college. That's what I did my undergraduate, post, everything. I'm a psychologist, right?
Mhm.
And I remember every way this person suffered. In my college, I was being taught this is just a hallucination, this is just a mild side effect. So I think a part of me was devaluing a lot of their experience. They were saying they were in pain, they felt like they were burning. And I was thinking, oh, this is just a hallucination. I was taught akathisia is just restlessness. And then later on, I learned no, you can feel like your whole body is on fire. So honestly, it was the first thing was seeing my own discipline fail somebody I loved very, very spectacularly.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that was the first part. Now, I personally had very little, thankfully, very little experience with psychiatric drugs. I was on Prozac for just a couple of months. And what I didn't realize at that time was that I took these drugs, and then within 2 weeks, I was numb. I felt none of the feelings I was feeling.
Mhm.
And even though I was studying psychology, nobody ever taught me to connect the dots.
Mhm.
It wasn't until 10 years later that I realized that, wait a minute, I went from feeling one way to 180 degree, feeling a completely different way 2 weeks into taking these drugs. And I never connected the dots. Nobody ever helped me. Personally, I was on antidepressants for just a couple of months, and then I was able to stop without any strong withdrawal effects. And I'm very lucky there because I know many people who are not that lucky. But for me, the side effects were just intense blunting of emotions that came out of
Mhm.
nowhere. So, like I said, felt one way, then felt radically a different way within a couple of weeks. So, personal experience aside, I thankfully, because of the personal experience with my friend and with myself, I got into a really good program,
Mhm.
PhD program in the US at the University of West Georgia, where critical psychology was taught, and it's not taught in many programs.
Oh.
So there was the first time that I was open to these ideas about, hey, things like marginalization and poverty and violence like have incredible, just these effects on our mental health. Whereas traditionally, I think psychology has what we call a fundamental attribution error.
Mhm.
Um, it's we say people have a tendency when they're trying to figure out why something happened, they look for reasons inside a person, right? This person did this because they're just a terrible
Yeah.
person, right? That's why they cut me off in traffic.
Yeah.
I think psychology suffers from the same bias. The minute they are asked, why did something happen? Why did this person break down? They look for reasons within the person.
Mhm.
And the program taught me not to do that. So it was definitely, some incredible mentors
Mhm.
who opened my eyes to philosophy, sociology, anthropology, all of that. So all of that kind of contributed.
Yeah, and it's changed your perspective. Yeah.
Heavily, yes,
Yeah.
from a very traditional, undergrad model to a better master's experience, and then to a much better PhD
Mhm.
experience.
But and you are both a spotlight interviewer for Med in America and the founder of Med in South Asia. And What inspired you to create a space specifically focused on South Asia?
Um, so one, I had loved my work with Mad in America. It's possibly the best work I have done. It's deeply ethical. You always feel good after doing that work, which is not something you can say for many jobs. Um, but I also realized towards the end of my stay in the US, which was around 10, 11 years, that there was a lot of conversation around South Asia and
Mm-hmm.
psychology because that's where the next big market is. It's a huge market, right?
Yes.
Yeah, for pharmaceutical companies, for medical device companies, and just everything. While there was a lot of focus and a lot of research, it was mostly being done by the diaspora people. So
Mm-hmm.
people who had come from India, were living in the US, UK, Canada, were second generation, and they had some idea about the culture and they had some idea about South Asian experience, but very far removed from what was actually happening on ground
Mm-hmm.
in South Asia. So, for example, I was looking at people's studies talking about women's experience in psychology in India, and they had studied like 4 or 5 women in an elite Delhi big city atmosphere that has nothing to do with the experience of Indian women. So it looked like very progressive work. Look, we are
Yeah.
talking about brown people, but it was very reductive work. And it was increasingly making me angry.
Mm-hmm.
And the second part was the global mental health movement, which was entering South Asia and the rest of the global South saying, hey, we have it all figured out in terms of mental health, and you guys are essentially idiots and you don't know what's up with you, which just sounded like I know it's rough and harsh, but it always comes down to the same thing, right? We know you better than you. And which I found ridiculous because, the global mental health movement and the discipline of psychiatry has very little figured out. There are questions everywhere. There are questions around whether the medications are effective, whether they are safe. There are questions around whether the screening instruments, what we use to find out whether someone has depression, do they work or do they do more harm? Because there are multiple studies finding that these instruments are doing more harm. We just tell everyone they're depressed based on a 10 question, thing. Um, PHQ-9, one of the instruments, is actually
Mm-hmm.
made by Pfizer, the pharmaceutical company. So the global mental health movement was entering and saying, look at these, poor folks, and they're not even screening their people for depression, and they're not even giving them the meds. And it was it was just sickening. That's the word. It was sickening
Yeah.
to be like, I know how messed up these things are in the global north. How dare you bring it in without questions, right? So yeah, Mad in South Asia came from a few of those things. Annoyance with the diaspora and global mental health movement.
Yeah. Oh, same in Poland. I mean, we're already launching Made in Poland, and the reasons are pretty much the same. I mean,
Yeah.
misinformation, gaslighting, and all this.
Yep.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, absolutely.
it's.
A- And do you see the experience being different for people in Poland, like their lived experience as opposed to what like the psychological
I
disciplines
mean,
tell them?
those mass affects nervous system in same way. They
Yeah.
the for everyone, and but the when I speak with my when I talk with my clients, they just each of them is following the same path. Like first, they are being gaslighted by the doctors, neglected,
Mhm.
and they say, "Okay, it's a recurring depression. You need to go back to meds." Then they realize that it's not recurring depression; that it's actually the meds that making them numb, or
Yeah.
other side effects like yourself, like myself. And then you realize, okay, there is no one I can turn to. There is uh, no profession that can help me
Yeah.
with this, and even though you do, when you decide to taper those meds, they are not aware of hyperbolic tapering, that you need to reduce
Yeah.
like very
Yes.
slowly, and hyperbolically not cut the dose by half every other week. So
Yeah.
it's a broken system, and the bottom line is that people are being left alone in this mess, and
Yeah.
and it's easy. And when you go back to meds, every time you re-stain, there is a high chance that you will get worse over time because of the
Yeah.
healing effect and all this. mechanisms that are being involved in the restatement process. So
Yeah.
I mean, same here, but maybe in a little bit different way. But
Yeah. Um, for us, the colonial vibe of, being under British rule for 200 years definitely has massive hangovers, right?
Mhm.
So we tend to kind of romanticize anything that comes from, something that seems, yeah, what advanced and scientific. And my God, good science is amazing, right? But I don't think a lot of what we're doing in psychology is good science.
Yeah.
And I don't have to be a critic of psychology to know that. Look at the replication crisis. All the experiments I used to teach my students, half of them are not even replicated. What garbage are we teaching them, right?
Mhm.
We're telling them this is how people work, especially again in global south, and all of that is being questioned across the world. I I remember this word you just used. It's gaslighting, right?
Yeah.
I remember a defining moment was reading this paper on global mental health movement and how amazing it is, and how it's actually community mental health care work, which community mental health care work can be incredible. It's right when it's done by community members. But this was just coming down from people being trained by WHO, UN, these big, and then they would be trained towards the NGOs, and then they would trickle down. So they had the same biomedical language and narratives.
Mhm.
And I remember this 19-year-old who was trained, right, by bigger NGOs. They call it task shifting. They basically say, look at these poor nations. They don't have enough psychiatrists, which means they don't have enough resources. As if psychiatrists are the only resources for mental health a culture can have. I mean, the audacity to say that, the arrogance that it takes, as if they don't have each other, as if they don't have community, as if they don't have, different medical systems, as if they, it's just, first the audacity, which enrages me. But it was a 19-year-old who had been trained by multiple, these bigger bodies in this language of psychology and psychiatry. And it was an example in this paper where she went to a woman who was suffering, a very, very poor woman in a lot of pain and crying. And again, critical psychology tells us that when you are poor, when you are marginalized, when you are under violence, you are going to feel like crap. No
No
surprise.
surprise. Yeah.
Yeah. And this 19-year-old goes and says, Amma, which is a word for mother,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that's what you would respectfully call someone older than you. This woman in her 60s, she says, Amma, what you're feeling is actually depression. You just don't know. It's an illness like any other illness.
Yeah.
And in that moment, in that paper, I thought, wow, this woman's experience has been forever collapsed
Yeah.
into one thing. And she's poor, she's uneducated, she doesn't have the means to fight.
Same here. We are labeling difficult life circumstances as mental illnesses, and
Yeah,
people buy this crap. And
yeah,
even like doctors, especially like medical students, they are labeling themselves like, I have ADHD,
yeah,
I have
yeah.
depression, I have no, you just have either shitty life or some unresolved trauma, or this is you, maybe your parents made some mistakes raising you, maybe they over criticize you and all this stuff, but it comes from your personality, not from sickness, illness, whatever you call it. So it's
And
yeah.
again, imagine what that does to a person, right? This is the work of Ian Hacking and looping effects of
But
how, and even Nick Haslam and labeling, right? The
mhm,
work around that. It's wonderful work. Like, we could have told this woman, in telling her she had an illness, we have also effectively neutered any possibility for social change.
mhm,
Because if I tell this woman, maybe you are really sad because, corrupt systems have, brought you to this place where you don't have food to eat and clothes to wear, and,
mhm,
that creates a person who gets angry and says, I would like to fight against the system.
yeah.
And this creates a person that says, oh, there's something broken in me and it's going to stay there
Yeah.
forever.
And
So,
on the one hand, it brings relief because okay, I have disease that I can treat, but on the other hand, it doesn't resolve this. Like it doesn't bring any solution to the problem. It makes it worse in the long run because when you are suffering, you need to do something about your suffering. You cannot mute your emotions because you will stuck in this bad environment that triggers your
yeah.
bad moods because of the circumstances.
Yeah,
So yeah.
absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely. Um,
oh,
it's quite horrifying. And the power differential between psychiatrists coming from global north and their knowledge, and people here, it's not like people here are helpless. They fight these narratives. They do, and they have resources to fight these narratives.
Mhm.
They have alternate medical systems. They have sense of community. They have a very strong familial bond, which can be bad sometimes, but really helpful too at the same time. I remember Tanya Luhrmann, Stanford anthropologist, once told me that if in the US you get psychosis, at some point statistics tell us you will be on the streets, you will be homeless. She studied psychosis in Chicago and amongst the homeless. That's not the case in India. More often than not, you will be taken care of by your family. It does happen that you will be discarded to a medical institution.
Yeah.
That does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't, especially women.
Mhm.
But it is not as nowhere as common that you will end up homeless as in the US. Just nowhere as common. It's also very common to find family members
Mhm.
inside psychiatric hospitals with the patients in India. They don't leave you.
Oh,
And in the US, that is not allowed. You're supposed to be alone in this environment that is sterile
yeah.
and
Same in
terrifying.
Poland. Yeah, they lock the door and just
Yeah.
pop a pill and they,
Yeah. In India, often family members just stay with you.
so it's
Like,
it's a,
no,
it's a
you're not.
it's a great. I think they
Yeah.
should support you, and this is the first
Yeah.
line of support, not
Yeah.
the doctors.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
Completely ignored
of course.
line of support.
Yeah, and and how do you see the global mental health movement shaping discourse in the global South, particularly in South Asia? Uh,
My God. And again, so carrying on the conversation in some scary ways, I think the first issue is the evidence behind the global mental health movement and the evidence base of psychiatry that has been just the whole serotonin hypothesis broken apart, right?
mhm.
Um, and what I think that could have been a moment where our discipline could have said, "Wow, we messed up. We can learn from this." But the worst part was when we figured out that the serotonin theory of depression
Well, it
is
has been debunked long time
right.
ago. That's we know
Yeah,
about it, but money,
yeah,
money is
money and
still running.
everything.
It's like how can you shut down multi-billion
Yeah,
business? So it's not gonna happen overnight.
absolutely. But the worst part was our response was, we never said this. Like psychiatrists and psychologists across, just there are open articles that went on, oh, we never said it was a serotonin,
Yeah.
imbalance. Are you kidding me? You can read the DSM, you can read formal websites of our most elite institutions, and you will find it there.
Yeah, now
But
they
we
washing
just
their
turned
hands
around and
off and
said,
just saying, "Oh well, it's
we never said this. And it's just people are idiots, and people just thought it's serotonin. We never said it. And every student I have asked who's come with a diagnosis, whether when I taught in America or in India, I've taught in both places, I teach in both places,
mm-hmm.
has openly said, oh, I was told it was a chemical imbalance. My doctor told me, my GP told me, my
Yeah,
general
and
practitioner,
yeah,
my psychiatrist told me. So, how dare we say that, oh, it was never us, right? So, the first issue with the global mental health movement is its evidence base, which is being just torn apart from every angle, right? We were so sure schizophrenia is going to be a genetic disorder. We will find the
and
gene for it.
it turns out it's a trauma response, severe trauma response, like in open dialogue
Multiple
therapy.
things. Absolutely. So, in many cases, even the question of what is schizophrenia is being taken apart, right? In India, in my research, I saw people who had vivid hallucinations and lived healthy, fine lives because there was nobody to tell them that your brain is broken.
Yeah,
And, so hallucinations themselves don't necessarily create distress.
yeah.
Uh, Tanya Luhrmann has found that. My research has found that they can create distress in a culture that tells you this is your brain fighting against you. Of
If culture
course.
tells you that this is stress, you will start perceiving it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But we know from Lerman's research in Ghana, my work in India, that they don't have to. Some people might feel distress, others won't. A woman once told me, in response to hallucinations of music, her mom would dance. Like that was her response, and that's it.
yeah.
Then the hallucination would end. She would stop dancing and go back to working in the field. So I think with the global mental health movement, they have to look back into their own evidence base. And then, of course, the huge problem, even if of coming into places where we already have a history of telling a group of people that they are somehow inferior and telling them, see, global mental health movement has changed. It was much more you are wrong and we are right, right? Now it's changed and it seems to be more progressive.
Mm-hmm.
So let me give you an example. I went for a conference recently, this huge conference of international psychiatrists, people from all sorts of elite bodies, WHO, this and that came. For 3 days, they talked about structural determinants of mental health, which is the idea that, things like violence, poverty, discrimination, in India, caste, gender violence, all of that creates mental health problems.
Mm-hmm.
Fine. Good. I asked them one question and I said, okay, so you're talking about these issues in places like India being caused by extreme poverty, this, that. Understood. What is our response to that? What is a response that is equally systemic? And I remember, I won't name his name. This guy, again, saying, "Oh, the first thing I heard was it's complicated. It's complicated," which is such a cop out. You're not with lay people. You are in a whole room of experts. You can talk about complicated things. Number one,
Yeah.
but number two, he just went back to well, antidepressants have shown some promise. And I wanted to hit myself in the face. And I thought,
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking you about farmer suicide in India as an issue that is deeply systemic. It's
Mm-hmm.
climate change that causes issues. There are money lenders who,
Uh,
um, who like take money from, they like give money to farmers and they have really scary, like loan shark policies. There are all of these things that put down a poor farmer who doesn't own his own land
mhm.
and he's depressed and he wants to kill himself. And you're coming in with antidepressants, right? So it doesn't matter that for three
And in
days
the
we
long run,
talk
he
about
will,
these things.
wants to kill himself even more because of the withdrawal. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So we can talk about global mental health now, we'll talk about all these seemingly progressive things. But if it was genuinely progressive, it would not be talking about mental health. It would be talking just about health because these things are not related,
Mm-hmm.
right? It would be talking about changes like, you know, fixing policies that don't take away land of farmers
Mm-hmm.
so they can own their own land, or making sure that climate change can be at least held to a certain extent, so farmers can, and these things would help people's mental health. But that's not where it went. It went immediately to antidepressants. So yeah, I think the new global mental health movement is looks smarter, looks more progressive, looks prettier, but it comes back to the same thing.
Uh, how do you think approaches to mental health and psychiatry in South Asia differ from those in Europe and the United States?
Well, a few differences that I can see. So I have met psychiatrists in public sector in India,
Mm-hmm.
and they are far more sensitive than the people I have met in the US. Like
Sensitive, you
these
mean like
psychiatrists,
empathetic? Like
sorry?
sensitive, you mean like empathetic
Oh,
in a
by
way?
sensitive, I mean, yeah, sensitive to to things like, so for example, let me give you an example.
Okay.
During the same conference, right?
Mm-hmm.
The public sector psychiatrists in India openly came out in a talk and very casually said, well, of course these DSM categories are not real, these are constructs we use to kind of understand pain. The i was proud of that person because I know I will not hear this from an American psychiatrist. Well, maybe from a few, but this is not something you hear
Oh,
from
they
people.
rely on those DSM diagnostics and
Yeah,
just like a Bible,
yeah.
treat it like a Bible. Yeah.
Absolutely. From another public sector psychiatrist, I heard, we all we are doing is diagnosing people. There is something really off with it. There is no listening. They were critiquing the same system. But
Wow.
you move out, yeah, absolutely. Public sector, older psychiatrists in India knew what they were doing. They were openly talking about we have to change the system that is hyper diagnostic. We need to actually listen to people. They openly talked about can we stop using medication for everything, right? But you move to the private sector in India,
Oh.
and it shifts, right? And private sector is growing in India. India's main health used to be all public sector, but that's
Mhm.
changing. Private healthcare is becoming bigger and bigger. And there you do not see this critical awareness
Yeah.
at all.
You just pay
There,
for the prescription, like, yeah,
yes,
same.
you go to a psychiatrist, you have 10 drugs in front of you within 15 minutes. Tuck, 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 right? 10 drugs in 15 minutes.
So
So
same
there is a
here. The
difference.
same situation is in Poland. Like we are way closer to India than to U.S.
Yeah.
situation. I think in the public system, like they are more aware of the that we
Yeah.
should seeking for the, let's say, root cause instead of speed running the prescriptions. But in
Yeah.
private sector, same.
Yes, absolutely. Um, and I think another difference which might also die away. So I did my internship at a really reputed um, hospital, psychiatric hospital in Delhi, in India. Delhi is the capital.
Mm-hmm.
And it was common to see, like I said, family members. So I remember this kid, this 15-year-old kid, had been put there because he had become violent towards his uncles and aunts. And it started with kind of the death of an uncle who he was close to. And then he had this very anxiety provoking experience in a classroom where a teacher was really mean to him. And the anxiety kind of, he felt a choking sensation in his throat, right? And it got aggravated. There was a death in the family. He got a little violent and started having seizures that they didn't find really a physical this thing for. So they call it pseudo seizures.
Mm-hmm.
He was there, put in the facility when I was an intern. And within 5 days, he was out. He was fine. And a huge part of it was either his mom would stay with him, or his dad would stay with him, or his sister would come and just hang out with him.
Yeah.
Like they did not leave this kid alone, right? He was not in a scary atmosphere where, there was no one with him. And I noticed this as a 22-year-old intern. And then I saw it repeated in this beautiful paper. I forget who wrote it. It's on the concept of sneham in Kerala. Sneham is love. It's a type of caring love. And the author is talking about how in Kerala's hospitals, psychiatric hospitals, family members often stay. And how the healing effect of having people who care for you be present for you. That's it. To see that someone cares for me, even in this environment, that they would come and stay with me.
And if he
So
end up
that's also
in
different.
U.S. in psychiatric hospital, the story would be way different. And
Very
it's
different. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Even in India,
yeah.
when family members are often not there, I remember an 18-year-old, 17-year-old kid begging me, and I was barely 22 at that time, saying, please call my mama, please call my mama, tell her I'll be a good boy. I think that was a defining moment in figuring out whatever we are doing here is very messed up,
Yeah.
right? For a 17, 16, 18-year-old boy to be crying in front of me, somebody with very little power, that just tell mama to come and I will be a good boy. um, I still get goosebumps thinking about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's different even in that way. Like there is a much bigger involvement of people who care for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not romanticizing family. Families can be very messed up. They can be abusive, they
Of
can be
course.
exploitative, right? But there is a tendency in psychology to demonize the family. There absolutely is, across theories. And I think that is also the wrong move.
Yeah.
Demonizing them,
Yeah,
romanticizing
I
them.
even recently read a paper when you go into psychotherapy and reliving your past, and then you change your perspective about your childhood, and it triggers a different response
Yeah,
to your way of thinking, the way you perceive yourself, because sometimes maybe it's better to focus on the present instead of the past.
yeah,
And it's a recurring customer, like the model of the Freud's model in
yeah,
psychology. It's a good business model because you are living in your past, and the therapy lasts for years, and you end up, okay, you blaming your parents, you blaming your childhood, and it's fine.
yeah,
It's a cause of your problems, but you have to deal with them, not reliving the past, and it
yeah.
affects your present. So it's, well,
And
yeah.
that's absolutely the thing, right? Like there are so many things that can help people. Therapy can be one thing, sure, absolutely, but there are other ways. And the problem with my discipline is it monopolizes help. It says
Yeah.
we are the only ones who can help
Yes.
you. Yeah, absolutely. right? Oh, no, not your family. They are your enemy. They created this.
Yeah.
Oh, no, not your friends. You are trauma
Without
dumping them if you tell them.
psychotherapy, there is no way you can succeed. There is you
Yeah,
need to see a specialist, and you need to once again trust in authority, and either it's a doctor, either it's a psycho, but it's
absolutely.
yeah,
And again, this is not saying that there aren't good therapists.
of
There are
course.
therapists who have incredibly helped people.
Yes.
Um, I know such therapists and I know people also, but I also know many more people who have been harmed by the
Yeah.
system, right? Partly because of things that you just said. They might make you reinterpret your experience in a more negative way.
Yeah.
So, they might make you think, oh, what happened to you is traumatic in this particular way. And then it changes your identity, and it's not always for good.
Yeah.
Um, and
Because you
trauma is
perceive
very different.
yeah,
Yeah.
when you once you start digging in your past, you perceive different. Your parents like they insinuate that okay, your mother was abusive, your father was absent, and okay, it happened, maybe it was true, but when you're starting growing up, you just for most at some level you're
Yeah.
forgetting about these events, and when you're reliving them, it messes up your your construct you built over many years. So this is
Yeah.
very
Absolutely. And constructs are helpful for many people. They might not be helpful for everyone. That's the thing, right? If I were to find so much great evidence base and literature that said that this type of therapy is incredible for people. Figuring out and reinterpreting your past and
yeah.
breaking down your defenses is amazing. I would say, okay, maybe there is, maybe we should be doing it. But there isn't literature. Like, even I remember a few years ago, there was a huge study that found that even the therapies that are mentioned in, that are called evidence-based therapies according to APS Division 12, that you get
Yeah.
that thing, evidence-based therapies, even those have really poor like power, and just are not great, except they had a couple of them that showed some effectiveness.
Yeah.
Plus, the way we study therapy effectiveness is like 6 weeks, 10 weeks.
Yeah.
Anything feels good in 6 and 10
Yeah.
weeks.
But
So the problem is at every level. It's at the level of research, at the level of training, at the level of practice, just education, at the level of it's rampant.
yeah.
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 Yeah, no, and that happens especially in the South Asian context, right? So, this is an example from students of mine who were from like Asia. I had an East Asian student who whose parents were rather strict because she had been assaulted. So they were trying to protect her, and they had basically told her, okay, you go to school and then you come back home, okay? And Asian parents are known to be strict, right? And instead, she was going to these counselors in the university who just kept on saying the same thing. You have to create boundaries with your parents. You have to have an open dialogue with your parents. And that's because, you know, most therapy looks at parents as the enemy. Your family is essentially the enemy, right?
Yeah.
Um, and
And then you change your mindset about your own
yeah,
parents, start
and
arguing with them, blaming
absolutely.
them for your,
And it
miserable life,
makes, absolutely.
and
And it makes
reinforcing
everything
this
worse.
idea that
Yeah,
okay, you feel deep down that they messed up, but you can, forgive them and move on. But
yeah.
instead of this, you just blaming your parents, and it happened to
And
me as well. I
it
mean,
doesn't
when I was
help.
in psychotherapy, I was convinced by them that it's all about your parents. You should maybe yeah.
And that's the thing. Again, not saying parents are not sometimes horrible and abusive,
Yeah.
and then they should be blamed,
Yeah.
and they should be, more than blamed if they're absolutely
Mm-hmm.
abusive. But in this student's case, her parents were incredibly supportive. Like, most American parents can't pay for their child's education. They were working really hard as immigrant parents to pay for her education. They were giving her a safe environment at home. There was just a cultural disconnect, and they were trying to
Yes.
protect their daughter. So instead of creating more rift between the child and a family that is also a source of support, the counselors should have understood the culture better.
Mm-hmm.
So when she told me this, all I had to tell her was, well, it's Asian parenting. It's strict. All you have to do is you hang out with your friends when you want. You don't have to tell everything to your parents.
Yeah.
All Asian kids have done that. They're like, yeah, mom and dad, we are totally studying right now, and you have a cup of coffee with a friend, right? And I remember the relief on her face. And she went, yes, Yes, that's what I'm trying to tell my therapists and my counselors, that, it's not always open dialogue. Like, Asian parents might not come and tell you they love you, but they will cook for you every day and they will cut fruit for you and put
They
it in front of
express
you
love
when
in
you're
different
studying.
way than European parents
Yeah,
or yeah.
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 And the problem again with psychology and the theories around family is that it says there is one way to show love. It's the only healthy way, and everything else is somehow lesser. And I'm sorry, but it just reflects the same racist theories packaged in a prettier bow.
Mhm.
And this Eliza Vandenborn's work, Nandita Chaudhary's work has shown how psychology and psychiatry, like, are disciplines that tear apart brown families and indigenous Native American families
Mhm.
because they don't understand the culture. Eliza Vandenborn's work is wonderful there. Nandita Chaudhary's work is in India. Um, how you can just tear apart families because you don't understand what love looks like. So, because it looks different. Um, I remember Eliza Vandenborn told me often it happens that social services in US would come and take away kids because they see a kid alone in home. They don't realize that for Native American families, for indigenous families, your neighbor will come and check on you every 5-10 minutes. You're not alone. Your aunt will come and check on you every 5-10 minutes. You're not alone.
Mhm.
But because the system of family is nuclear family in
Mhm.
amongst most white groups, they don't understand that there are other systems of support for this kid.
Yeah.
So if the kid is alone right now, that's neglect, child taken out, put in a system that is far more terrible than anything else.
This what happens when you live in your own bubble and you cannot, grasp the idea
Yeah.
that things might be different around
Yeah.
other places.
Yeah.
Like, what gives you hope when you think about the future of mental health activism, both globally and South Asia? I mean, we recently we this
Yeah.
like just recently we discussed the negatives, but do you
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
about
No.
any positive for the future?
That's a great question, and especially for me because I sometimes have difficulty finding positives.
Yeah.
Uh, but I see it when I look at my students, and they are full of hope.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I feel jaded, and then I see changes, and I see the system corrupting those changes.
Mm-hmm.
I see service user research in which people who are using the services are part of the research, right? And that's incredible, right? But then I see that they are used as tokens.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, oh wow. But when I look at my students and I see hope, and they think things can be different,
Mm-hmm.
and they know things can be different, and honestly, that's where it is. And it's something I've found resonating in other people who are like huge experts in their field. As long as you stay open to people coming in, people who are newer in the field, and you don't become rigid and
Yeah.
think like you know everything. I'm thinking about the example of Robin Murray, who wrote this beautiful article called "Mistakes I Have Made in My Career," and
Mm-hmm.
he received knighthood for his work on schizophrenia. He's world's leading expert on schizophrenia,
Mm-hmm.
and he does a whole break of everything he used to think and how it turned out wrong, and it's a beautiful article in humility, and I think that's where I see it. Uh, in terms of um, just
And what
the
about like
hope in my
over-prescribing part of psychiatry? Like, do you think it's changing? Do you think it's changing for good? I mean,
No, I don't. I don't see it changing for good right now, at least, sadly enough. I think there might be some movement first in the US, maybe.
yeah,
And then because India tends to follow a US trajectory than a UK trajectory in many ways. So I know UK has a bigger critical psychiatry movement and they have NHS.
yeah.
India is going in a different direction with, increased privatization. Increased privatization brings in
And increase
insurance
prescription
companies.
rate. Yeah, yeah. Mm.
Absolutely. Um, so, although the one thing that I have seen hope in and is possibly the fact that I've been hearing murmurs over and over from a few people that pharmaceutical companies are moving away from psychopharmaceuticals because they've realized that this is just, this place the criticisms are so big and they're everywhere, and people are getting increasingly
Mm.
suspicious of these drugs. I mean, UK's
Yeah,
National Institute of Care and Excellence changed their guidelines around antidepressant withdrawal,
of course.
and there are multiple reasons. So they are moving away from these drugs, and I think that's a great idea. But what comes next could be worse. So who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
Um,
But or they just changing the chemicals, like they are making more selective drugs and all this stuff. So this is
yeah,
also another thing to
yeah. Uh, so
worry about.
I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of hope.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the only thing we have right now is the Joseph. You know, I guess you know Joseph with During from US, from Taper Clinic Outro with Mark Horowitz.
Mark Horowitz, yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes,
so
yes,
these
absolutely.
are the only guys in the prescribing world. I mean,
Yeah,
it's gonna take some time, but you know, when you have a hammer, everything is a nail, and the same applies to psychiatrists. That this is the only tool they have to prescribe psychiatric medication. So how can they abandon it? Like they will
yeah,
in the long run they
um,
lose a job simply as that.
yeah.
So.
Someone actually told me that, I don't know who I was interviewing, and they said, psychiatrists have lost the ability to do clinical work. Like there used to be a time they could, they also had to be trained in talking to people and listening to them and, spending time with them and not always prescribing stuff. And all of that is gone. So their only work is prescription now. And in losing that skill went away to therapists.
Mhm,
And now there is a movement that everything is the brain. So neurologists and doctors are taking over a lot of the prescription stuff.
mhm,
General practitioners will prescribe antidepressants at the drop of a hat,
mhm,
right? Especially in the US. Um, so one of these, the prescribing is going to this place. The therapy they let go and that went away to this place. What are they left with? And there is like a huge existential crisis in the discipline of psychiatry because of, again, if you left clinical work and prescribing is done by everyone and anyone, you know,
mhm, yeah,
and if it's all about the brain, then the neurologists have come in and taken over that. So what are you left with?
yeah. Oh, it's hard to imagine that this can collapse, like, because if you take one piece of the puzzle of this whole system
Yeah. Um, but the system is
broken
smart
and
and broken and smart and
yes,
smart.
at the same time.
Yeah, I think Owen Woolley is somebody who's traced especially psychiatry and how it reinvents itself every 20, 30 years to stay, you know, in touch with whatever is new, right? And in this reinvention, it makes sure that it doesn't go, you know,
Hmm.
um, go away, which, yeah, most fields have to reinvent themselves, but it's usually based on better evidence and not, force.
If you could change one thing about how the world thinks about mental health, what would it be?
Um, I think I would take out the word mental. I would. I think the
Oh,
minute we use the word mental, we put everything inside the mind. There is a tendency to just collapse everything inside a person, inside this little thing
it's
between your
all in your
ears, right?
head. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think it makes us forget everything outside, everything in the body of the person, the rest of the body goes away,
Of course.
the relationships go away, the systems go away. So it's a massive collapse, which is partly why I think even though we have these some really amazing theories talking about how relations and the world around you affects you, the minute we use the word mental health, it comes down to this.
Yeah.
So it allows us to be like, okay, the problem with you is extremely, racist policies that make your life living hell. Why don't we do some therapy about that and talk about your feelings?
Yeah,
No.
it feels like you isolated nervous system from the rest of the body, and the cultural aspect, the nature, the
Yeah.
diet, all
A-
this stuff. And
And it's an arbitrary boundary to make between mental and physical and mind and body, and which doesn't exist in many cultures, that boundary, and the body and the world, it's an arbitrary boundary. I mean, um, I think Evelyn Fox Keller, who is a historian of a philosopher of science
mhm.
and a historian and a physicist, I think a theoretical or a theoretical physicist. So she's brilliant in number of ways. She had this lovely paper um, how about epigenetics and how
Mhm.
the human genome is reactive. It's not sitting there as we used to think the genome is like a blueprint. It's
Yeah,
going to say,
it's
hey, I'm going to give you schizophrenia and you bipolar. It's a reactive system that
of course.
uh, that responds to our world. It's I think of it as a system that dialogues with the world, that dances with everything. So she writes beautifully about, much better than I can articulate, how the boundary between nature and nurture and biology and environment and body and culture are nonsense and arbitrary, right? You cannot tease apart these distinctions. And the minute you do, they're artificial boundaries.
Mhm.
And I think the word mental does that. If we were to talk about suffering and grief and pain and distress, we would be having better conversations rather than mental health. Um, yeah, we'd be having more human conversations.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And
Uh,
yes, speaking about epigenetics, I mean, like this is crucial regarding health overall because when you have trauma, it can be spread over the next few generations, like the let's say obesity from the obesity generation from the Second World War, like when people were starving and
mhm.
it triggers
Right.
epigenetic changes for the next two generations. So it's a bigger picture than we think it is. So the same
Yeah.
applies to mental health. It's not only about the brain, it's about overall well-being. I don't like this let's say holistic word because it's
Mm.
it reminds me of some sort of
Right.
like scamish stuff,
Yeah.
but this is actually it hits the spot. I mean, we forgot that we are
Yeah.
social creatures, that we requires nutrition, we requires physical activity, bonding,
Mm.
and it's not only about just approaching that okay, you are sick, you have disease, you have mental
Yeah.
illness, and
And that reminds me, right, in saying that we are embodied and relational and cultural and biological and all of those. Maybe the other big change I would like to see is just this deep understanding that there are multiple ways to be human,
oh,
and there are multiple ways to be a healthy human being, and there are multiple ways to be so for example, we see this idea that trauma is the same everywhere, and no, like there are things that can traumatize a person in in Canada, UK, the global north countries typically, and they might not do the same thing. So you can take an example of the death of a child, one of the most devastating things, right? Things that is so deeply painful that it breaks apart families sometimes, as we hear. I remember um, my grandfather told me that, he had a younger sister. And I said, what do you mean? I've never heard about this younger sister. He was like in his mid 80s at that time. And he said, yeah, she died before, and she was like 3, 4, and whatever. And I realized that because infant mortality was so high in these places, what devastates you is different across places, not just culture and places, but also historical times.
mm-hmm,
So I think Nancy Shepherd Hughes has a book, Death Without Weeping,
mm-hmm.
something like that, which deals with similar issues like death of a child and what is trauma and what is not. Um, and I think we are forgetting that in psychology when we go into a place and tell them that this is how you can process this experience in a healthy
They
way.
tell you
You
how
have
you
to feel
should
it.
feel, what you should cry about, what
Yeah.
you should be happy about, but it's
Yeah.
also about
Yeah.
great cultural differences. Yeah.
Absolutely. Or that you can't feel it in your body, then you are somatizing pain. Somatization is a very common way of experiencing life across cultures, north, south, more so in the south. It's when you have a stomachache before an exam. It's when you have a headache because you're stressed, right? It's nobody's right to come and tell you that you have to process things mentally or verbally and talk about them rather than feel them in your body. I mean, if verbalization works for you, beautiful. If you want to emotionally process things and think about your feelings, great. But don't have the audacity to go and tell a different group of people that how they're doing it is wrong and how feeling things in their body and experiences in their body, or in places like India, experiences are felt relationally. So, beautiful papers around how grief is a collective experience in
Yeah,
India. It happens in between people and not within you. Don't go around telling people that their experience is wrong and the way you want to process it is the only one. That would be something I would change.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's very powerful what you just said, and I resonate with that so much. And well, oh, well, it touched me. I mean,
I'm sorry, I can get riled up and angry and,
yeah,
you know,
I can
yeah.
feel that anger, but I'm very touched by what did you just
Thank you so
I
much, Tomash, for having me and for such great questions that, made me think about things even I haven't thought for in a while, just some experiences.
yeah
So thank you for bringing that
yeah
forth and for having me in
yeah
here.